Now, one thing that we've not added so far is any squash and stretch. So let's add a little bit of that in now. So at the moment we've keyed our scale up at the top and at the bottom. If I just jump back into the dope sheet, we'll be able to see that. So if I roll this down, you can see our scale value has been keyed at the top and bottom. So what we want is, as we're accelerating down, our ball to feel like it's stretching out towards that final position here. So what I'm going to do is just go back a single frame and I'm going to scale this ball. So with this ball control selected, I'm going to hit S and Z to just constrain this to the Z axis, and I'm going to stretch it out a little bit. What we need to remember is that whenever we stretch something, we need to maintain its volume. So I can hit S and then Shift Z, which will constrain to everything apart from the Z axis. So this is actually going to allow us to squash it on both the X and Y axis at the same time. I'm going to squash it in a little bit to try and maintain that volume of the ball. And then I'm going to hit I to set a key. I'm just going to set a key on scale in this instance. So now you can see as our ball moves down, it's gradually stretching out. It returns to its normal shape at the bottom. And then as we take off again, we want to stretch this ball out again. So again, I'm going to hit S, Z to stretch this up a little bit. S, Shift Z to squash it in on the sides. And then I to set a key on the scale. Now if I move back to this position on the ground, we actually want to squash it down when it hits the ground. So again, S and Z to scale this in Z down a little bit, and S Shift Z to scale it out. And we actually want to move this down a little bit as well. So I'm going to hit G and Z to constrain it and move it back down till it's touching the ground. Okay, and again, we need to hit I to remember to set a key. I'm just going to hit location, rotation, and scale again here. So now you'll see as we move down, we're stretching out, we squash, and then as we take off, we stretch out again because we're accelerating, and we decelerate into that top position. So we're returning back to our original shape. But what we also need to remember is that this ball needs to stretch in the direction of travel. So on this frame here, I also want to add in a little bit of rotation. So I'm going to hit R and I'm going to rotate that control object a little bit so it's aiming towards that final position. Then I'm going to hit I and set a key on rotation. So you can see here, it's rotating in that direction of where it's going to hit. And I want to do the same coming out again. Rotate it in the other direction and hit I, set a key on rotation. Okay, and we're going to do the same for the next couple of bounces. So as it's losing momentum, it's not going to be stretching quite as much, but we're going to add a little bit of stretch here. So S and Z to stretch it out, S Shift Z to squash it in on the sides, and we'll add in that little bit of rotation. And then I want to hit I, and I want to set a key now on both the rotation and the scale. And I'm going to move forward 2 frames and do the same on the other side. I'm going to hit S, Z, scale it up a little bit, S Shift Z, squash it in, and then a little bit of rotation as well. I, key the rotation and the scale. We'll go back to our squash position, scale it down a little bit in Z, and out on the other axes, and again remember to move it down a little bit as well on Z, and then again we'll hit I and key location, rotation, and scale in this instance. So again we're stretching, squashing at the bottom, stretching out again, and as we come down we might add just in a little bit of stretch on this one, not too much. Just wants to be a bit more subtle this time. And a little bit of rotation, and key that rotation and scale. I think because we're losing momentum, I'm just going to add a little bit of squash there. And I'm going to key my scale and rotation here as they are, just so I can add a little bit of squash on this frame without affecting the following frames. So I'm going to scale it down in Z ever so slightly, Shift Z out a little bit, and G. Again, move it back down so touch the ground, hit I, and set a key on everything. There we are, so we've got that little bit of stretch, and now for those final bounces, we're not going to have any squash and stretch at all. Okay, and let's play that back and see what we've got. Now you can see at the moment, with this cube in here, it looks like the bounce is actually quite motivated. But if I go up to this icon up at the top here, show overlays, and turn that off, and play this back, hopefully it now feels a little bit more natural without that control object visible.